How's everybody doing? My name is Darrell Bennett. Come back swinging. You gotta love black folk. We like loyal as an old hound dog. Just so loyal and considerate. Because the truth of the matter is, and I really want to talk to my white people that are the ones of y'all that still do follow me, and I mean this in all seriousness. Understand that there are many black people who are conflicted about what's going on now. They want change, but they don't want to hurt people's feelings. I felt the same way, which is why for a long time, I just didn't talk about certain issues because I was concerned about how people would view it. But you need to understand, at least from my perspective, when I'm speaking, I'm not speaking about people. I'm talking about white systems, and I can no longer sit by and see the suffering of my people because I'm concerned how you might view me on social media. But having said that, the conflict is real in a lot of people's minds. That's why you have people saying, well, go ahead and take down the statues, but you can put them in the museums. Hell no. You're not going to put them in the museums either. They need to be destroyed. So let me tell you why. Let me start with Vice President Biden, who I am certainly supporting for president. I do not want to criticize this man because we just got to get the guy who's in there out because he's just bad for the country. And I supported Republicans in the past. People that know me know that I was a Republican at one point. I don't know what I was thinking, but anyway. Having said that, I think it is imperative. I absolutely think it is imperative that we do what we can to see to it that this man becomes president. Because the division and the hate that's being spewed out of the White House is absolutely despicable. But having said that, I thought it was interesting his answer yesterday about which statues to destroy and which ones not to. And he said, well, Confederate warriors, soldiers need to come down. But if it's the Jefferson Memorial, we have a duty to protect it. I disagreed wholeheartedly. And I want to explain to you why. The real only difference between the Confederacy and the Union had whatever differences they were had very little to do with any type of racial ideas of equality. I mean, to say we fought the Civil War over race is like saying that FDR mobilized troops into Europe to save the Jews. No. It was about money. It was about power. It was about territory. It was about financial systems. And then as history is rewritten, we try to ascribe a moral cause to it. So having said that, I want to be very clear that any person that had slaves that we know of, that espoused slavery that we know of, that held up a patriarchal racial system of oppression that we know of, their statues should be destroyed. So you say, well, Jefferson, what would happen to the memorial? I think you keep the memorial, you take down the statues. And you be very clear at the memorial as to why his statue is not there. Because there has to be a revision of history, a revision of the revision. Because so much of history is whitewashed, it's false, it's falsified, it's not even information, it's misinformation, that we've got to begin to speak truth. So that's my line as far as the statues. But I have a few questions that I want to ask for people. I often wonder when people are so tied to these statues, and I'm talking mainly white folks now, that, are so angry that, well, what's going to happen next? You're going to take down George Washington? By the way, he should be taken down. Every statue of him should be removed out of this country. We've got to begin to cleanse the land of idols. I'm going to get to that later. But why are you so attached to it? That's what I'm trying to say. And I think before you get upset with me for my opinion on the matter, if you are a white person watching me and you have an anger about the statues being taken down, I think you have to first ask yourself, why are you so attached? Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I am not just a student of history, I'm a history buff. I'll stand toe-to-toe with anybody you put me out on in social media. I'll stand toe-to-toe, and I guarantee you I know more history of America than they do. And this is why I'm bringing up this point. What do you know? Let's take Jefferson. What do you know about him except the fact that he was president? Do you know what political party he was in? Do you know how many children he had? Do you know where he was born? Do you know what year he was born? Do you know anything about him at all? So I ask that because if you're so attached, why? This isn't like somebody that you know, somebody that you've studied, somebody that you've had this close relationship. I could see if you're somehow a descendant and you want to make this argument, I'm fighting for the legacy of my great, great, great. Okay, I still think it needs to come down, but at least I can understand your attachment. But for people that couldn't even point him out, if I showed you 20 white folks that were president, if you probably couldn't even point him out. If I asked you what political party he had, you couldn't tell me anything about him. Couldn't tell me not one single thing. Why are you so attached to the statues? And I would submit and suggest to you that your anger is probably fear of losing white privilege. That's what it has to come down to. Why are you so attached to the statue? I'm going to give you an instance. I remember when I went to China, I bought a shirt for about a shirt that had Mao Zedong on the front. And Mao Zedong, for those of you, many of you may already know, was the leader of, he's the father of modern communist China. The sad thing is he killed millions of people to do it. And I remember I wore the shirt. I think I wore the shirt. I was here in America. I don't think it was in Europe, but I brought it back to America. And somebody stopped me. It was an Asian woman. And she said, do you know what that man did? And I was like, well, I mean, historically, I've read some things. And she began to just talk to me about the history of Mao Zedong. Now, it wasn't any history that I had not heard of before. But hearing how hurt she was about this man, because there were people in her family, she never met him. Let's be very clear. She never met him. But her, parents and her parents' parents had struggled under this system that he created. And I remember just thinking, I won't wear this shirt anymore. Not in public. I still have the shirt. I wear it at my house. I do not wear this shirt in public. Why? Even though it is my right as an American citizen to wear what I want. Because why would I want to have something on me that hurts so many people? And I'm thinking if she's said, and she didn't do it in anger, if she's going to stop me in the street to say this to me, how many other people are offended by this shirt? And my question is, this is for white folks, because I just think we have to just speak right to it. If you know these statues cause this much hurt to millions of people, why are you so attached to it? I mean, what skin do you have in the game? I mean, I just don't understand the level. Well, I do understand the level of attachment, because really it's fear of losing white privilege, which is going to happen. I mean, just the country's changing. We just got to all get over that. But you've got to ask yourself, why am I so attached? And I gave the example of me with the Mao Zedong shirt, because it would be like me just holding on and wearing this. And at some point, because it's one thing, even the Bible talks about this, that it's one thing to offend and not know you're offending. But once you're clear that it's offensive, I mean, okay, look, I'm 34 years old. When we were younger, nobody was talking about taking down the statues of Jefferson Davis. I'm not even talking about President Jefferson, of Thomas Jefferson of the country. Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. It really wasn't even talked about. So I can understand that people didn't know that it was offensive. Now you know it's offensive. Now you know wholesale that the flags, the statues, these American presidents that have been, they're known for oppressing my people. Once you know that, for you to still be so strongly attached to holding on to it, you got to check yourself. You really got to check yourself, because what you're dealing with is a level of not just lack of empathy. It goes beyond that. It's this sense of you'll cut off your nose to spite your face. And it's sad and it's disturbing, because we haven't even gone anywhere yet. We're just talking about statues of dead people that lived 200 years ago. We haven't even touched the stuff that's really going on in this country. And if you offended already, you in for a bumpy ride. Now let me share something else that it boggles my mind about the statues. People say, well, the statue's about remembering. Okay, remembering what? Well, it's not about remembering slavery. It's about remembering who they are. Okay, I'll go with you there for a second. Let's take Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson lived in the early 1800s. Okay, so we're talking 200 years ago, at least. George Washington, president in the late 1700s. You're looking at 220, 30 years ago. Okay, so you say this is about remembering. So this is my question. If the statues are about remembering history, and remembering the past, why is it that when we talk about remembering slavery, then the conversation is, well, that was so long ago, you need to forget that. You see the double standard though? See, this is the stuff that I be talking about. And I have to say stuff because I know my pastor gonna probably watch this and my mother gonna watch this, but I really want to say something else. This is the type of stuff that I be talking about. That you want to, in one breath, talk about remembering all of these people who are dead and gone. And it's been 100 years, and it's been 200 years, but we want to hold on to that history. Okay, so when I talk about slavery, when I talk about how there were 300 years of oppression in this country, when I talk about how people were chained to one another, and how my people were raped and were made to carry the babies of white slave masters, the first thing you want to go to is, well, you didn't live through that. You should forget that. It's not about, I probably could forget if everywhere I walked I didn't see another statue. I probably could forget if the Confederate flag wasn't being waved around. And let me digress about the Confederate flag really quickly for ignorant people that don't know what's really taking place. The Confederate flag, yes, was designed in the 1800s, 1860s, when we were fighting the Civil War. After the Civil War, the Confederate flag was done, gone, and obsolete. I would challenge you to find any picture of the Confederate flag in the 1970s, the 1870s, the 1880s, the 1890s, the early 1900s, because there were none. It was not until the 1920s when lynching really became a thing, and when the KKK had this they call it a reawakening, that they begin to glorify the Confederate flag as a symbol of racial supremacy. So when people talk about this history as if it had been flown for all these years, it's not true. Now, I'm not talking about the state flags that still incorporated it in their state flags, parts of it. I'm talking about the waving of the flag. It was not, because you have to remember, when the Union won totally. And so it was there was a military presence in the South. Read about Reconstruction. It was a military presence in the South, and they forbade the flying of the Confederate flag because it was seen as then a rebellious symbol. But it wasn't until the 1930s when it was clear we're flying it not as a symbol against the United States of America, but for what the Confederacy stood for. That's when it had that rebirth. So when people say they're flying the flag and they're flying it about their history, it's a history of racial supremacy, and it was then when that flag began to be used to lynch people, right? So let's talk about it. Let me read some of these. Exactly, fear of losing white privilege, systematic oppression. Now let me talk about this. People say, well, where do you put the statues? Because let me be very clear, you cannot put them in the museums, not publicly funded museums. That's the same issue. That's the same issue. I don't think that taxpayers should pay for racial symbols of injustice to be memorialized on the state capitol, and I don't think it should be in a museum. Absolutely not. If you got your little private museum that, whatever, and you're funding it, you can do that. And we'll just have to work around making sure we boycott that, make sure that comes to an end. But state funded, no, it needs to go. So you ask yourself, well, where do you put them? I'll tell you where you put them. You put the statues, put them in the Mississippi River, where they put our people. Yeah, who are alive. Where do you put them? Put them in the Atlantic Ocean, where we know that there were so many slaves that were thrown overboard in the transatlantic movement from Africa to either America or the Caribbean, that the pattern of sharks changed for 300 years. Yeah, put them there. Put them there. You want to ask, where do we put them? Destroy them. Remember when we went over to Iraq? I say we, because, that was the American government. Went over to Iraq and everybody wanted to make this big, that was the big symbol that somehow, we won, because they took Saddam Hussein's statue and they first of all, they decapitated that thing and they toppled it and dragged it through the streets. And everybody recorded it and everybody was excited. When I say everybody, I'm talking about the American media. This was their way of saying that they're on board with us and the struggle. That's what we do to the statues. Yeah. No, you can't put them in a museum. And that's a whole nother thing, because I think that most museums need to be cleansed anyway, because you're teaching whitewash history. You don't, like I said, we haven't even started talking about nothing. We haven't even started talking. We got to stop saying, for instance, Thomas Jefferson had a mistress. He had a slave he was raping. Let's call it what it is. What do you mean he had a mistress? What do you mean he had a mistress? But this is the stuff that's happening, and until we address it and we get clear about it, and like I said, you gotta love black folk because we still trying to find way. Well, you can put it in the museum because people are concerned about how people feel. You know what? I think we got to get past personal feelings and get to justice. And this is really where I wanted to end. Scripture tells us, because I'm gonna bring it back to Scripture. Scripture reminds us that in order for truth to prevail, that the land has to be cleansed of idols. They're idols. These men were not being led by the Holy Spirit. Let's call it what it is. I know you might want to say they were founding fathers, they were Christian nations, and anybody that has what they call whatever this secret knowledge is, or the Masons, they'll tell you that they were not Christians. I'm talking about the founding fathers. They were not Christians. These were people who espoused Christianity to further their own. Let me not say they're not Christians. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I can't say that because I don't know the conditions of a man's heart. I won't say that. But what I will say is that the trajectory of their lives, the upward trajectory, the total trajectory, I'm not talking about isolated events. The total trajectory of their lives was not under the influence of the Holy Spirit. Okay? And I don't want to get into a historical discussion here, but that's very clear. They were agnostic, many of them. Many of them believed in this sort of secret knowledge that made them better, or thought made them better, and so it was a lot of that going on. So they're idols. I'm talking about the statues. And we've got to cleanse the land of the idols. We've got to cleanse the land. And this is really, I want to say this to white folks, because I don't want to dance around it. As long as you hold on to these symbols and you hold on to these things that, one, have no power except what you've ascribed to them in your heart. Two, you're holding on to things, they're coming down anyway. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. The time has come. It's a tipping point. Where's my book? Malcolm Gladwell's book. A tipping point. Okay? He's not talking about racial stuff in this book, but it's a book that talks about how there's little things that happen here and there, but then there comes a point, a tipping point, where everything just happens at once. And so that's what we're happening. So you're fighting now on the other side of change. And as long as you hold on to that, not only will you make change take longer to happen, but you destroy the country in the process. Now, I want to see the idols cleansed. I don't want to see America destroyed. I want to see the government systems and structures revised. I don't want to see America destroyed. I want to see truth spoken to power, and people who are wicked in high positions of power and influence to be removed. But I don't want to see America destroyed. But what I believe will happen is that as long as people are so stubborn about change, they'll end up taking the ship down with them because they refuse to just remove the captain. They refuse to move some of the furniture. Think about how crazy that is. The ship might be going down, but you have this opportunity, America, to get it right. Throw the idols overboard. Nobody's talking. Throw them overboard. It's time to go. Instead of looking at it like, well, these statues shouldn't come down now, and look at it like they've been up for 300, 200, and 100, in some cases more years than what they should have been up. Yeah, they should have never really been up. But they've been up. Okay, we can't change the past. But the time is now changing. And I hope, I pray, and you know what? I want to play a song for y'all. I usually don't do this. You know what? I can't do this. It's Facebook. Because if I play the song, I don't own the rights to the song. It's Josephine Baker, The Times They Are Changing. And actually, Bob Dylan was the one that wrote it. The times are changing. They're changing. They're changing. And you can hold on to what was. And I get it, because we all want to hold on to what was. Not racially. I'm just talking about in life. It's hard to change. I get it. I'm one of those. It's hard to change. But things are changing. They're shifting. The country looks different. People look different. People think differently. We're more woke now. We're more woke now. And so get out of the way of change so we can really, and I almost hate to say this word, this phrase, because it ties it to this man that's in the White House, but we can make America great again truly if we deal with the issues. I mean, think about it. Egypt had time and time again to get it right. We look at it like the 9 plagues, and then the 10th devastating one where it killed the firstborn of all the children and all of Egypt would have happened inevitably. I don't know if that's the case. I think it was stubbornness. I think it was Pharaoh's hardness of heart. I think it was because many Egyptians just felt like, screw it. That's the Israelites' problem if they're in slavery. But I believe Egypt was being given time to get it right. You have to know that God was moving in Egypt and moving over the hearts of people in power long before Moses ever came along. God is a God of justice. It was 430 years. I guarantee you that there were others that spoke up and said, this is not right that what we're doing to the Israelite people. There's going to be a reckoning. And what ended up happening was, because Pharaoh refused to get out of the way of God and the way of change, he not only bankrupted his nation, he not only destroyed his military, but we know historically Egypt never was at the power that it was before. Never. And all of it was because they refused to stop getting in the way of God. I need you to understand something. This thing is of God. God is a God of justice. I mean, look, you cannot think that men who owned other people, they branded them. You want to talk about a tattoo hurting? Try a brand. And they raped these women. And they tormented, they split families apart just for the hell of it, just for the fun of it. They threw lots and auctioned off human beings. They auctioned it right on Wall Street. I'm here in New York. This history is not that far removed. Right on Wall Street, where they auction stocks and bonds. You want to know why they picked that place to build the stock market? Because there were the first auction blocks of people. Before they were trading people, paper as commodity, they were trading people right here in New York City. The history is right here. It's in front of you. It's all around you. And you think God is just sitting by and watching this and there will not be a judgment? Come on. You judge people on earth for doing 1/10 as much. And you've held it over their heads. I've already talked about that. You think God is going to sit by and continue to allow this level of oppression, a refusal to do right. And now let me talk about that sinister spirit. It's a sinister spirit. It's a spirit. It's not just a person. I need you to understand this. We're wrestling not just against people. This ain't just Trump and Mitch McConnell. This is a spirit. They're being used by the spirit. But and they need to go. But when I say go, they need to be voted out. I want to be very clear on that. They need to be voted out. But when we talk about these systems, oh my gosh, we're talking about spiritual forces that oppress. They use any means necessary to do it. You can't tell me that God, who is a God of justice, he's a God of justice, that that there's not going to be a reckoning. I mean, you don't even have to get deep and spiritual and pull out a Bible to know that you will sow, you will reap what you sow. You've sown division. You've sown, and this goes beyond black. I was talking to somebody the other day. I was a young white guy, and I said, you know what? I cannot continue this conversation. Because we weren't even talking about black issues that really angered me. We're talking about the Native Americans. And I was like, can you imagine what it would be like to be displaced from your entire land? I mean, we still never even dealt with that. I mean, we still never, so this is deep. And we've got presidents that we've looked up to. I want you to read about the Trail of Tears. I want you to read about the Trail of Tears, what they did to the Native Americans and how they made them walk from, and I want to get this right because I should know this better than what I do. Andrew Jackson was a general at the time. They walked from, I think, South Carolina to Florida. They made them walk. They basically took whole tribes. And that's just the Trail of Tears. And I remember when I was, I know I'm digressing a bit here. I remember when I was in high school, I asked the teacher, what's the difference between a massacre and a battle? Because to me, it seemed like a massacre meant a lot of white people were killed, but a battle meant that a lot of others were killed. So I never really understood that. It was a massacre when you when they fought back, but it wasn't a massacre when you did. But we've never even dealt with that stuff. And you know what's interesting is, and I'm going to end on this point because I got to go. In Germany, they have a collective sense of guilt over what happened with the Holocaust. They do. I mean, so much so, I think some of it is lightening because now there's a generation after generation after generation that has come. But there is such a guilt, this national collective guilt, because let me just take this back really quickly. When the American forces liberated Germany, as it were, and liberated the concentration camps, many of the generals took the local populations of Germans and made them go into the concentration camps. When I say go, I mean tore them. They wanted them to see this what was happening right under your own nose, and you did nothing about it. Because I don't want you to just think this was so removed. And so many Germans hold that. I mean, and they are very, especially the older generation of Germans. Some of it is waning now that are like my age and younger, but the older generation of Germans, because many of them remember, and their parents remember, walking through those concentration camps. Because the American generals are like, how did you not notice? How did you not see entire communities of people disappearing? Don't pretend like you didn't know. You had to have smelled the ovens. And I visited Dachau. I saw Auschwitz. I walked and saw the ovens. I saw where they hung the people. I watched it. So, yeah, it's like you knew something was going on. But I'm saying this to say, it's almost like if you take a dog and you put its nose, you know what they say when you have a dog and it poops in somewhere it's not, you're supposed to put its nose in it because what the dog associates with it is, I wasn't supposed to poop there. We never did that here in America. See, that's the problem. It's not just that many white folks here have not come to the understanding that there should be a national guilt as to what we did with the Native Americans and what we are doing and have done to African Americans. But they get angry that we would have the audacity to talk about it. For real? You're angry that we think statues should come down when the statues are of men who you say in your own history books, this isn't secret knowledge, in your own history books, oppress my people. For real? You have compared Malcolm X, because I need to go here, to someone in the KKK when Malcolm X never talked about lynching nobody. And if he did, which he didn't, nobody was lynched under the Black Power movement. So you have somehow ascribed Black Power with being KKK. Are you serious? But that's what I think white folks should understand. It's a frustration on many of our parts that you won't even acknowledge the truth of the history. So I get none of you had slaves. I get that. I understand that. There's no argument about that. But can you first of all acknowledge what happened in the past? And can you acknowledge that you are a recipient, many of you are recipients of that system? I didn't own slaves. Yeah, well, nobody said you owned slaves, but the money that was received, where do you think that money went? They went to build the same businesses that now we're fighting to get a leg up just to work at. Yeah, we need to talk about it. And so it amazes me, like I said, you take Germany, where there's a national guilt about something, and I don't think people should have necessarily a guilt, because sometimes guilt and definitely shame leads to bad places, but let's acknowledge. Don't be so dismissive. Well, that was in the past. First of all, slavery was in the past, physical chattel slavery, but Jim Crow is still happening. Let's be very clear about that. It's still happening. It's still going on. It's still taking place. I was just watching something on Netflix, or maybe it was Amazon Prime, where they were saying how they were chronicling that one school in Georgia that still has segregated proms. I think they had their first integrated prom 10 years ago. That's not my parents' generation. You know, there are still cities or towns in America that call sundown towns. Pretty much don't be black caught there sundown. I remember when I was driving through Virginia one time, and my friend said, you want to see something neat? You know, he trying to be funny. And we drove through, and he took me to this place. If I'm not mistaken, well, he was driving. Yeah, clearly he was driving, because I wouldn't. And I'll never forget, we drove to this obscure road, And all of a sudden, he stops under a bridge and he turns off the car and it's pitch black. And all you could see was chalk of nooses that had been drawn all around the bridge and all under it. Because the way, even though it was pitch black, it kind of illuminated that. And when I tell you, I felt not just intellectually, but like something within me. I was so frightened. I was like, if you don't drive away, it's gonna be a big problem. I'm sure I used some other words as well. We drove away, and he later explained, yeah, they say that was a town where the KKK used to hang people. That wasn't 50 years ago. That was me who was there. And I remember feeling so frightened that, and I know he's being funny. We were young, we were in high school. You know, he's thinking what could happen. Let's say somebody had stopped us there. Let's say people had come out of the woods, because that's, I mean, you know how you on those one-lane roads. Who's to say what have happened? So let me end on this point, because I know I'm always talking about practical things that we can do. Practical things. And let's begin. So I'm not just going to put this on white folks. I'm going to put this on all people. Let's begin to have the honest conversations and acknowledge what happened in the past. Acknowledge. Part of the problem where there can't be healing is that there's no acknowledgement. It's hard to heal what you won't acknowledge. And I will go as far as to say, I don't think God is a forgiving God, but I don't know where forgiveness comes in when we refuse to believe we need forgiveness. So when I'm saying we now, I'm talking about as a nation. Remember the blind man that Jesus healed? And the Pharisees got mad at what Jesus said. And they said, are you saying we're blind too? And Jesus said, if you would have admitted you were blind, I could have given you healing. I could have given you sight. I wanted to give you sight, actually. But because you refused to admit your faulty, fallen, deviant condition, I didn't heal it. And because we still are having an argument about what's systematic racism versus, well, those are isolated events. Because Congress still has to argue about whether lynching is a crime. Okay? This is now. This is what, so I want people to understand. This isn't 50 years ago. People say, so, well, when's the last time somebody was lynched? Why are we still arguing about whether it should be a crime, though? Because it is still happening. It is still happening. But until there's acknowledgement, and it's sad because you're not just hurting yourselves or maybe even hurting the feelings of black people. You're hurting this country that you say you love. Let me tell you how deep white privilege, the fear of losing white privilege, power, and position is. Let me tell you how deep it is. You will go to a rally in the middle of a pandemic without a mask when you know people are dying, because you're more interested in speaking out against the people than you are protecting your health and the health of your own family. That's deep. I mean, that's deep. That's some Taliban type strap a bomb to myself and blow myself up to blow other people up. That's that type. I know you got mad because you said, yeah, these Muslims are crazy. Some of them extremists, they'll blow themselves up to kill you. But that's what you're doing. You're so defiant about change that you'll go to a rally in the middle of a pandemic? Are you for real? What? It's deep. That's why I tell people, for us to have change, it's probably gonna get worse before it gets better. Because this shows people will sacrifice their own health. They'll sacrifice their own livelihood. They'll sacrifice themselves for this belief that white power structure should stand. I want you to know that you need to check yourself. If you are that, first of all, attached to statues that of people you don't even know, and you couldn't list 5 things about them at all, other than the one thing that you might know, that they were president or they were in the Confederacy. If you're that attached, 2, if you find yourself arguing for the right to go to a rally and congregate with people in the middle of a pandemic, you're probably struggling with a little bit of fear of losing white privilege. I won't call it racism, because I think a lot of the things that might show up as racism are not people consciously being racist. It's just so ingrained. But that amazes me. That's how they elected Donald Trump. You cannot tell me that you are a white person in this country, and I'm gonna do a whole thing on that because I need to talk about that. And you are uneducated. I'm gonna call it what it is because I ain't got no time to play with you. And you poor, and you support Donald Trump. What has he done for you? Other than speak up and probably speak your language of racial supremacy, it's nothing you can say that can convince me that you could be supporting him for any other reason. It's that real. Let me tell. I know I said I was gonna go, but I'm not going because I need to talk about this. If you support Donald Trump as president, and you are uneducated and poor, let me break down what that means. If you make less than $250,000 a year, and I'm not going to say because you make less than that, you're poor, but I want to break down why I'm saying what I'm saying. And if you do not have a college degree, at least from a four-year institution, not an associate's, and you support Donald Trump, I'm really trying to figure out what he has done for you other than speak your language in terms of racial supremacy. It's nothing else. Now, I can understand if you make more than $200,000 a year, if you own your own business, race aside, I could see why you might be tempted to support him. Because you're going to get some kickbacks. It may benefit your pocket. But these poor rednecks running around here, two teeth in their mouth and can barely speak the English language, and you support Donald Trump, that's crazy to me. Because he has not benefited you economically. He has not benefited you socially. He has not benefited you culturally. The only thing that I can dare to think of that he's done for you is he speaks your language. And the reason, I want you to know something, you're not poor because the Mexicans, because that was a lie that was told. They didn't take your job. But the truth of the matter is a lot of jobs that folks have, you weren't going to give it to them anyway. You're going to have to eat some of that on your own. But I won't even get into any of that now. It's time that we begin to ask ourselves, where is white privilege showing up in us? Because it's showing up. People's, like the old saying is, your slip is showing. I've seen some of the most hateful, disturbing, nasty, vile, and angering comments on social media in the past month, 2 months, that I've seen in my entire life. And you're really telling me who you are. You're telling me who you are, and you're telling me why we need to be as forceful about change as we need to be. Maybe if you were on board, maybe we could talk about, well, let's find a safe haven for the statues. But because it's clear you won't give an inch, no. Progress, what is it? Power concedes nothing without a demand. We gotta fight this thing all the way through. You're still killing black people, even after George Floyd. You're still doing it. You would think police officers across the country would be on notice. That's what you would think. If you're a police officer right now in America, you would think you would be extra cautious about shooting particularly black men. You would think. I mean, you would think after all this, but it goes to show how deeply ingrained it is. The caucasity, that's what I'm gonna call it. The caucasity that you would continue, you're still shooting, you're still doing these things, even after the riots? Oh, no. And yet, you call people like me radical, because I say destroy the statues, but you're not radical because you're destroying human lives. I'm not going to play this game. We've got to begin to deal in truth. Because as long as we deal in a lie, as long as we are trying to salvage people's feelings, I'm not talking about be offensive for the sake of being offensive, but some stuff is going to offend people because that's on them. If you're offended by me being a voice for justice and truth, because I come with facts, Let's be very clear. I come with facts. I'm not just coming with passion and emotion. I'm coming with facts. I'm showing you your own double standard. Your own double standard when it comes to remembering. That's your double standard. We should remember the statue of the guy that lived in 1790, but we shouldn't remember slavery. We need to forget that. We should penalize somebody for the rest of their life because they made poor decisions. Let's say maybe they sexually assaulted someone, and so that's why we gave them a 10-year sentence or a 20-year sentence, and they shouldn't get any type of real job for the rest of their lives. We just hold that over their head. But yet, we shouldn't, for someone who raped somebody and was systematically raping people, we shouldn't take down their statue. I mean, you see what I mean? It's your double standard. You created the purity test that your own people can't pass. I did a whole Facebook Live on that. If we held those folks that you fighting these to keep their statues up to the same purity test that you hold people that look like me, people who've been caught up in the system because they made decisions, it wouldn't be no statue left. You wouldn't have no statue left. I'm telling you that. It would not be a statue left. I already dealt with that. It wouldn't be a statue left because that's your purity test. That's your purity test. You said one mistake, throw away their life. Okay. So it's okay to do that for the young black guy that's selling weed. But when we're talking about somebody who owned human beings and tortured them, well, they've had good things in their life too. So that's why we keep the statue up. It's a glaring double standard that we've got to deal with. Let's have an honest conversation. And I don't have no time. I don't care if you're white, red, black, purple, or green. I don't have no time to talk in platitudes. We're past that. I don't want to have an intellectual dialogue about the theoretical underpinnings of race in America. Let's have an honest conversation. Let's talk about how these things are continuing to show up. Let's talk about just the double standards. And if we can have an honest conversation about that, then we can begin to make some change. But until we get there, and I don't think we've held people's feet to the fire enough, because we let them preach a message, and we say, oh, okay, everything's fine. Or we let them have a little diversity slogan in their company, a little hashtag, we support the movement. Really? Well, what does your corporate board look like since you support the movement? What is your C-suite officers look like? I say C-suite, I'm talking about your CEO, your CFO, your CHRO, your chief legal officers. What do they look like? What do they look like? What do your board of directors look like? What does your chairman look like? And if all of them are white, don't tell me you support the movement. I can't continue to play the game that people like to play. Like, we support this, but really when we talk about it, you really don't support it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you love me, Jesus said, feed my sheep. I mean, it's not about saying I love you. If you love me, shouldn't the actions follow it? If you're committed to the community, like your Twitter says on your company, I should be able to look and see some things that you do. I should see investments in black communities and black enterprises. I should see the investments. Put your money where your mouth is. Where a man's heart is, there his treasure will be also. Put your money where your mouth is. Let's not be so reactive, and now that the nation is in the middle of a racial reckoning, you want to throw some money at a charity. No. Let's begin to systematically talk about how we empower people. Let's start going into communities and paying for and doing programs for mentorship for young black boys and young black girls, for young Hispanic women and young Hispanic men, because there's been a gap in our communities. Let's address that. Don't just talk to me about how when people get out of college that you're finding a way to help them get a job to check off your quota when the barrier started at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old and they never got to college. When they're building prisons based on third grade reading scores. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Let's deal with that. And until we have an honest conversation about that, Until we have an honest conversation about how do you have a people that make up less than 12% of the nation's population up to make up over 50% of the prison system? How do you, unless you walk away with that black people just do more crime, and Spanish people too, because when I say black and Hispanic, blacks and Hispanics make up about 75 to 80% of the incarcerated population in this country. So either just black and Hispanic people, it's no two middle roads to it. Either you say they're just bad people, just overall we just keep doing wrong things, or there's systemic injustice we need to deal with. And let me tell you what they did in New York. In New York, they found out that 95% of the arrests, about a month ago, 95% of the arrests that they were making for violating the pandemic, for violating social distancing rules, were black and Hispanics. Isn't that crazy? Yet, together in the city, we make up less than 20% of the population. How do you look at that and not say, on the face of it, it's something wrong? That's what makes people angry. I think sometimes in law, we have a saying that talks about, I forget the Latin, I think it's ex lipsa facto, but it's lipsa facto. It means on the face of it. There are certain things that we can look at and we say, on the face of it, there's an issue. We don't even have to get deeper. On the face of it, when you see the numbers, you either walk away saying, these are just bad people who keep making poor decisions, or there's something else at stake here. There's something else at stake here. That was what they used because they were mad at Sotomayor. They didn't want Sotomayor to become Supreme Court Justice when President Obama nominated her, because she sat on the Court of Appeals, and they were mad, the firefighters in particular, because what happened was there was a case, because I'm going to give you an example of what on the face of it looks like. There was a case that went up to the Court of Appeals, and basically what happened was in Massachusetts, they found that no firefighter for a certain, I think, class or for a certain year, none of them were black. And what they said was, well, the reason why we didn't pick them is because none of the black people passed the test. And so the argument that went up to, it didn't make it to the Supreme Court, but made it up to the Court of Appeals, was on the face of it is something wrong with that. How do you say that nobody except for, and it wasn't just black, only white people passed the test? Something's wrong with your test. We don't even have to get into, unless you're just trying to say we're dumb and that Hispanics are dumb and that Asians are dumb. You're trying to tell me that all these people took the test and the only people that passed it were white. And so they were mad at her because she agreed with the argument that on the face of it, something was wrong. And they were so angry that they went and tried to boycott and tried to keep her from being Supreme Court Justice. It didn't work. But I just want to give you an example about how these things happen. So on the face of it, we have an issue and we need to deal with it. Okay, let me go because I went far longer than I wanted to. But I hope that this helps people. I hope that we can, I am committed to being a voice of justice. I'm going to just keep it real. And that might mean that I lose some friends along the way. It might mean I lose some supporters. But it's important. I'm not here to play the church game. Not going to do it. I'm not here to play the political game. I'm not here to pussyfoot around the issues and nibble and because I'm concerned about, well, how will you take it? I am here to speak directly and boldly, because until we do that, righteousness cannot speak. And justice stands afar, and truth can't enter. That's what the book of Isaiah says. Truth can't enter because a lie has reigned. And until we tear down the lie and every thought and high thing and imagination that would dare try to exalt itself above the word of God, you're going to have people like me that's going to talk. And if you offended now, unfollow me, because I'm telling you, I haven't even gotten started. I haven't even really said nothing. That's the irony. I haven't even talked about nothing yet. I've just given you a smattering, but promise and believe we're here to stay. And the deliverance of our people is not to be shortchanged. This has been a long time in the making, and my eyes are grateful that God has allowed me to see it, and even better, to be a part of it. My name is Darrell Bennett, and I want you to know, no matter what you've been through, no matter what has happened, no matter what people say, whether it's personally, collectively, as a community, as a neighborhood, as a people, we